for being here with us today, Ms. Barkha Dutt. I'm so pleased to be talking to you. Ms. Barkha Dutt is somebody who needs absolutely no introduction. She is one of the most well-known personalities of the media world. She first worked at NDTV as a group editor, and one of the notable points in her career was when she went to Kargil and covered the Kargil war from there. She also had her own talk show, We the People, which later became We the Women, and it aired for 16 years. She has been the recipient of many prestigious awards in our country. Some to name are the Journalist of the Year Award at the Ramnath Goenka Awards in 2005, the Best TV News Anchor English at the Indian News Television Awards in 2007, and the most prestigious, she was also honored with the Padma Shri in 2008. Miss Barkha Dutt, along with a journalist, she is also an author and has written her own book, The Unquiet Land: Stories from India's Spotlights, which was launched in 2015. She is often referred to as the Oprah Winfrey of India. Thank you so much for being here today, ma'am. I can't wait to speak with you.
Thank you for having me. Thank you. And I'm sorry it took so long for us to finally get to do this, but I'm glad we're doing it.
Thank you, ma'am. So, ma'am, my first question to you for today is that what is your view on the state of journalism in our country today, and how do you think it could be better?
So, of course, when we talk about Indian journalism, we have to specify what kind of journalism we're talking about. I think digital journalism today, or even print journalism, is actually, quite inspiring in moments, in parts, as it has always been. Of course, there are some problems, but that said, you're seeing some great reportage in both of these spaces. I think the decline has really taken place in broadcast journalism and television journalism, which used to be my medium. I've now, of course, moved to digital journalism and set up my own digital platform, The Mojo Story. But I was in television. I used to call myself a child of television because I was a first generation television journalist. But the decline in that space has been so sharp and so terrible and so sad that I was telling a friend the other day that if I was a young person today and watching this TV, I would not have become a journalist. I had one other dream, to be a lawyer. And when I was young and in college, journalism seemed more exciting. But if this were the TV journalism I had been exposed to, I would not have chosen to be a television journalist at least.
Yeah, I definitely think the state of affairs in TV journalism can be better, but digital journalism is taking the lead and, showing the right way that this is how it's supposed to be done. Because if not for digital journalism in our country would be quite lost today, if only dependent on TV television.
I mean, TV, I think a lot of people have started watching more for entertainment. They keep it on in the background. They just, kya ho raha hai? But it's a tamasha. It's treated more as a tamasha. And I think, I'm sure there are individually very talented people who are still in the TV industry, but the way TV is being run, it's just really tragic to see.
I agree, ma'am. So, ma'am, if you had to describe the journalism world in one word, how would you describe it? And also, do you see yourself having a responsibility because you're in the public eye? Do you see yourself having a social responsibility?
Yeah, I think journalism is about being the bridge between issues and people. That's what journalism is. And journalism is about giving voice to those who do not have a voice. And journalism is about going into difficult situations which other people may not have access to or are not willing to go to. So for me, for example, the past year of 2020 was all about traveling all across India. When everybody was at home, even my colleagues from television were inside their studios, and I covered 25,000 kilometers across India from Ladakh to Kerala reporting the pandemic. And I think I bring this example up because for me, this was a test of journalism. It was a test of my journalism. It was a test of my commitment to my profession. And I think journalism is exactly that. It tests you when things are difficult. Or in peacetime, everybody can put together, a few shows and do them. But journalism's real test is when things get difficult, where do you stand? Are you willing to speak for those whom no one else is speaking for? I think that is what journalism is. And to tell a good story. At the heart of it, it will always be to tell a powerful story. You can't just stand and preach to people. Your job is not to be an activist. Your job is to use good storytelling to get an important message home.
Yeah. I completely agree with that. I think being a journalist in this past year especially has been quite hard because despite everything, that was the one thing that did not stop. Life had to go on, work had to go on because
Yeah.
People were dependent on journalists for getting news. So definitely, I think it was a hard year, and like many thanks to all the journalists in this world who worked last year, because it was
Yeah.
a very hard year. So, ma'am, it's what are some of the struggles that you would like to say that you face in your career as a journalist?
I mean, they've been, or like any career, it's been 25 years for me now as a journalist. I started working in 1994, December, 1995, January, and we're now in 2021. So like anybody else, I've had my ups and downs, but I would say mostly on average, there've been more ups than downs, mostly ups. I think for me, the toughest thing has been not recognizing my own truth in how people have sometimes seen me. So, you come and you do a story and people will label you, and they'll label you. Sometimes the right wing will call you biased, and sometimes the liberal left will call you biased. And sometimes I found that the difficult thing for me was that there could be hundreds of journalists covering one story, but all the scrutiny would be on me, as if, the media was only me, and it didn't really matter that I was one of many. I somehow became answerable for all of media. So I think if I had to sort of say what has been tough, that has been tough. Tough has been to grow a thick skin to what other people think about you, because in the public eye, every day on the internet, every day there's an opinion of you, there's an opinion a minute of you, and you learn over the years to grow a very, very thick skin and not respond to that opinion. You learn over the years that people will sometimes say really rubbishy things about you online, and you have to look the other way, or you have to. When I was younger, I used to argue with it. I used to say, "Why are you saying this about me?" But as you grow older, you learn to grow a thick skin, and I think learning to grow that thick skin has been the toughest part of my journey.
Yeah, because I'm sure along with all the love that you get as a journalist, there are obviously people who hate it and
yeah, I don't mind criticism, but I think that to see kind of hatred or bigotry or sexism or misogyny, abuse, sometimes even threats, violent threats, rape threats, death threats. So, all that has, and lies. Like sometimes you're just accused of doing things you've never done, because it's so easy for anyone with a phone and a data card to just say anything. But of course, yes, it's also important to remember that there's so much love and adulation and endorsement of people. And one of the big discoveries for me in my journey across India reporting COVID was the kindness of strangers. People I didn't know at all would opening up. I had no place to stay. My crew had no place to stay. Nothing was open. Often we didn't have food. I had a single pair of shoes and they broke. And people they were willing to feed me and give me their home to sleep in and give me their car to drive in, and someone sent me shoes, and every day somebody would send us food. So you also recognize that, this online world, we sometimes lose perspective of how kind people really are in the real world, and we confuse the online world with the real world, and it's not always the case at all. So, yes, one has had to grow a thick skin in this journey, but one has also received a lot of love and support and adulation from people I don't know. So it kind of works both ways.
Yeah, definitely. So, ma'am, I know this is kind of a bold question to ask, and I wouldn't have the answer to this, but where do you think you'll be in life 10 years from today?
I think that in 10 years from today, the company that I currently run, my digital platform Mojo, will be 10 times bigger, and I will be just as obsessed with the news as I am today.
That's wonderful. Your work shouldn't feel like work. It should feel like...
Absolutely. The day my work feels like work, I'll stop doing it.
Yeah, you should pick something you like and make a way to earn money out of it. And do that for the rest of your life.
That's right. Correct.
So obviously, ma'am, the pandemic has completely changed our life, and like you said, professionally for you, it was a hard year because you were out traveling while...
It was a good year. It was a good year. I would say it was a very difficult year, but I also think that I did some of the best work I've done in 25 years in this year. So there's also a sense of pride. It was a very difficult year, physically difficult for me and my 3-member team, because we were literally traveling to the eye of the pandemic. As I told you, we were also taking risks with our lives. We didn't fully understand COVID. There was so much we didn't know when we first set out on our journey. But I would say a hard year, but a very good year. There are 2 stories in my life that I feel the proudest of. One was reporting the Kargil war, and the other has been reporting the COVID-19 pandemic.
And I think you've done a wonderful job at it, ma'am. So, apart from professionally, that's how the pandemic professionally affected your life. How did it impact your day-to-day life?
Well, firstly, I was living it out of a car. That's how it impacted my life. So, like I told you, we covered at Mojo Story 25,000 kilometers. And, we literally were not sure where we would be the next day. Of course, as the months went by, it became easier to get places to stay. It became easier to get food. But when we set off in the end of March, there was so much uncertainty, and sometimes we would drive 16 hours to a place, and when there was no place to stay, we would come back to Delhi because it was easier to come back to our base than to find a place to stay. And then we said, "Ye to is tarah nahi chalega, let's just leave." And that's when we kept going from one city to the other, and we went through Rajasthan, through Punjab, Haryana, Uttar Pradesh, Gujarat. When we reached Maharashtra, we were like, "Oh my God, we've reached Maharashtra, we've reached Mumbai." And then we knew we could reach the south. So we traveled all the way to the south, Telangana, Karnataka, Kerala. And we came back and were heading from UP to Bihar when the Chinese incursion happened in Ladakh. And then we said, "Oh my God, this is such a big story." And that also happened in the middle of COVID. And so we turned our car back, drove 17 hours back to Delhi, took the first flight to Ladakh, spent 5 days there, came back to Delhi, then got into the car again and went back to complete our journey in Bihar. So, for me, that was pretty much my life for half the year. And then I came back finally to Delhi, and since then I've been busy building my company, building my work, expanding my team. Then I had We the Women. We the Women before COVID was a ground event, but this year I did it as a global digital town hall. So there was that, and the year ended with that, and so that's been my life, and this has been my whole life. There's literally no other life.
Yeah, hard life but good life.
Hard life but good life. Well said.
So, ma'am, my next question is about your show, We the Women. So, what would you say is your most memorable episode from that?
So I'll talk about this year because, or rather, let me just talk about the concept first. So when I created We the Women, for me, We the Women was a space where women and men from all walks of life, famous and not so famous, but all extraordinary people could come together and talk about anything. And the idea was that you could break taboos and talk about really important things, but you could do it also while having fun. And also that there was complete equality between the glamorous people whom we know as celebrities and the non-celebrities. So for me, it's been a labor of love. It's now been, more than 3 years. We the Women in 2020 was its 4th edition. But it was a very challenging time because we had to reimagine it in a digital age because there were no ground events happening. So I started by moving We the Women from an event into content. And I started doing these series of interviews called Conversations for Change, the Female Voice. And I covered literally everything from, women naval pilots to sexual abuse, to why there aren't more women in science, to why Kareena Kapoor is speaking up for what she calls sustainable fashion, to how Masava Gupta faced racism as a half black Indian woman. All kinds of issues were covered, and it culminated in this global digital town hall. And one of the advantages of it being digital as opposed to real was that the virtual format allowed us to connect to multiple countries and multiple cities. And in a way, like when we were doing it as a ground event, we could never bring in so many people from the world. But this year we were able to bring in the 15-year-old Gitanjali, whom Time Magazine put as the Kid of the Year from Colorado. We were able to bring in Soumya Swaminathan, who's the chief scientist of the World Health Organization. We were able to bring in Padma Lakshmi, who spoke about being raped at 16 and how she went from being a television host to a political activist from New York, and of course we were able to bring in an array of people from across India, whether it is the co-founder of Byju's, the edutech app that we all know, Divya Gokulnath, Kareena Kapoor speaking like never before, sitting there without makeup, nothing, sitting at the other end of a Zoom, just being like her authentic best self. Kiran Shaw sharing how she'd actually trained to be a a beer brewmaster, and how she went from that to becoming the head of Biocon and becoming this billionaire women. So there was so many different voices. But for me, what really shines on the We the Women stage is when you're able to give voice again to those who don't have a voice, right? Or when you're able to talk to a celebrity and reveal something about them that they've never spoken to anybody else about. So, whether it's Kareena talking about growing up as a daughter of a single mother, and she spoke a lot about that, about her parents' unusual relationship, or why she sees herself as a rebel, or whether it was Alia Bhatt and her sister Shaheen Bhatt talking about depression, or whether it was
that was definitely one of my favorite episodes.
I love that. That was very powerful.
It was very real and raw episode.
Yeah, so similarly, this time, I think one of my favorite episodes was Neerja Birla and her daughter Ananya Birla, where mother and daughter spoke about Ananya's battle with, again, mental illness, and how Neerja as a mother had to, sort of handle that, and how this is one of India's premier industrial families. The world's gaze was on them, their extended family's gaze was on them, and just to see them being willing to share their vulnerability, I think to me that was my favorite pick from the day.
I mean, it's a very hard thing to share. Just come out in the world and share what you've been struggling with so openly. So, ma'am, who are your role models, and why do you admire the qualities that you admire in them?
So my role model very clearly is my mother, who died when I was very young. But she was a journalist at a time when women were literally not encouraged to do our job. She was 19 years old when she went to the Hindustan Times to ask for a job. And she was told that women could be hired, but they would cover flower shows. She rose to become the head of the bureau, the chief reporter at Hindustan Times, and later worked at India Today. Her name was Prabha Dutt. And, a lot of people think that I am India's first woman to report from the front line, but actually that honor belongs to my mother. And, in 1965, when the war broke out between India and Pakistan, she wanted to cover the war. So she went to her editor. She said, I'd like to cover this war. And the editor said, we don't send women to the front line. A woman can't go and cover a war. So she said, if you're not going to let me cover the biggest story that there is, then I'm going to chutti de. So she took a few days off. The editor gave her some days off, and she took a notepad and a pen, and she went to the war front alone, and she started sending dispatches. She had a cousin in the army at that time. She went to the Punjab border and she started reporting. So that was the kind of, those were the kind of stories I was brought up on. And she was my first journalistic role model, but she was also a very ferociously strong woman. I saw her also receiving a lot of scrutiny, going through tough phases in her own life, and I have vivid memories of observing that as a child. And I think she taught me that you shouldn't, one, do what you love and love what you do it the best you can. Three, you answer only to your own conscience. You don't answer to the rest of the world. Four, the better you do at your work, the more you will be judged, the more people will love you, but the more people will also hate you. And I think I learned all of these things from her. And I learned that there is no life worth living that doesn't have passion in it. Live with passion. Live a big dream. Don't live a small dream. And I think she was and remains my primary role model.
That is wonderful that she, broke all the gender norms that there were, and she did what she thought was right, and despite, I'm sure, a lot of scrutiny.
Oh yeah, I think we forget that women who came before us made it possible for women of my generation to do what we do today.
Yeah, I mean, you being a woman in 2021 today receives the amount of hate that you hate. I can't imagine the amount of scrutiny and hate that your mother got for being honest.
Exactly. So I think women have to keep making it easier for the women who come after us. Otherwise, there's no point.
Yes, definitely. So, ma'am, today, if you had to look back at your 16-year-old self and give her a piece of advice, what would you tell her?
I would tell her that things feel like the end of the world sometimes, but it all passes. And I think at 16, every terrible thing that happened in your life felt like your universe was crashing down. And I think I would tell my 16-year-old self that you will still wake up with a smile. You will still have good music, good friends. You will still have people who love you, and you will still find what you love to do, and that will always keep you going in life, no matter how bad it seems. Sometimes.
Yeah, that is pretty accurate, I would say, for a 16-year-old. So, ma'am, on days, I'm sure you love your job, but everyone has those days where, they can't bring themselves to do it, and you just complete lack of motivation.
Yeah.
So in those days, how do you motivate yourself to get back up and do what you love?
So that's a great question. And I think, yes, of course I have those days. Who doesn't have those days? Everyone, you have to be a robot to not have those days, right? I think for me, I need sometimes some time out. I need to spend that time with people who knew me from before I was a journalist, my college friends, one or two school friends, because I know that that's my safe space. I know that their interest in me is nothing to do with my work, nothing to do with being a public figure or well-known figure, that they knew me when I was 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, the most precious years of your life. So for me, just sort of healing with my friends, and then sometimes just reading a good murder mystery. I think that's enough. Eating a box of nutties. I think these three things is usually enough to get me back on track. And long walks when I'm in Delhi. I walk every evening, 3.5 to 5.5 kilometers. I just walk at City Fort, and it's a green open area. I'm not often in Delhi, but when I am, that revives me.
Yeah, I think walks in Delhi are one of the best parts of life.
I agree.
So, ma'am, now, finally, my last question to you for today is that, apart from We the Women, because you spoke about what your favorite episode from that was, but overall, except the Padma Shri, Kargil War, and the We the Women, what's your most memorable experience? Like, if you had to tell one person, this is why I do, what would you tell them?
I would tell them about my COVID coverage. In some ways, it was more difficult than Kargil, because in Kargil, the adversary, the enemy was known, the enemy was visible. It was also a much more finite time period. COVID has gone on all year, and I'm still here covering it. I knew what I had to do to save my life in Kargil. I didn't always know how to do it, but I knew what I had to do. In COVID, I didn't know what I had to do to save my life. I was also responsible for my team. So that was an added anxiety for me. But I also think that at a time when television, in my opinion, failed the COVID story because it mostly only did talk shows. To me, the fact that as a startup digital platform, Mojo was able to send 4 of us out across India, and shine a light on, especially on the exodus of migrant workers. I walked with the workers on highways. I walked with them through nights. I got onto the back of trucks with them. I fought for the rights of them to get trains and food and water. And I believe that coverage that we did helped make the country wake up to the plight of migrant workers. So I really feel that the one story, apart from what you mentioned, Kargil, the Padma Shri honor, that reminds me why I became a journalist is the work we did during this COVID crisis.
Because once again, you helped speak for the people who don't have a voice of their own.
And went out at a time when people said, are you mad? Why are you doing this? And I said, I can't tell this story sitting inside my studio or sitting at home.
Yeah. It's so much more real when you are experiencing it with the people.
Absolutely.
They were going through the worst. We were still privileged enough to sit in our homes and watch the news and worry about it. But they were going through the absolute worst at that point.
Absolutely.
Actually, I have another question for you, ma'am. So, ma'am, can you just, obviously, working in Kargil during the Kargil War, it has to be a very daunting experience. That is something very crazy to even think about, to be there covering a war front. Yeah. So, how would you describe your experience there? Can you tell us a little bit about your experience in Kargil?
So I was in my 20s. I'd never had exposure to military conflict before. Like with my mum, I had to really convince first my organization, then the army, कि मुझे जाने दीजिए. The military was quite worried about having a woman at the war front because they said, look, it's a complete war zone. We don't have bathrooms. We don't have hotels. Nothing will be open. But I managed to convince them that if the boys, use you go behind a rock or under a tree, I will also use that as my bathroom and don't worry about it. The war was unfolding along the national highway between Srinagar and Leh. Of course, it was really being fought at the high mountain tops where Pakistanis had come in, and our army was pushing them outside of our territory, and that was the war. But we were operating at a time when there was no live broadcast. We had no OB vans. We didn't even have phones. So there was no way to actually communicate to our newsrooms what was happening. And a small group of us, 4 of us, there were many journalists there, but 4 of us, my cameraman, me, and 2 other journalists, Gaurav and Shashi, we became this group, and we were like these people who would go up and down in a car on the national highway, and just the whole military conflict was unfolding along this highway, or parts of it was unfolding along this highway. And what would happen is that there were these giant Bofors guns or multi-barrel rocket launchers. They would take an aim at the mountains on which the Pakistanis had intruded. And as our men were moving up physically these mountains, from the ground on the highway, we were pounding them with ammunition. But the moment we would hit them, they would hit back. So I have these vivid memories of just jumping out of my skin, right? I never even heard the sound of a Bofors gun. I remember the first time I was standing in front of one, and the gun went off behind me, and I jumped, and you could see that in that piece to camera that I was doing. And the moment our impact was on that mountaintop, there were like ammunition and shells raining from the other side. We were being pounded by ammunition from the Pakistanis who were on top of these mountain peaks, our peaks, and clouds of smoke and running through it, and sometimes lying flat on the road and spending nights in a bunker, and meeting. They were soldiers, but they were also very young men at the front. They were also in their 20s. And because I was a 20-something, I think I was able to talk to them in a way that maybe an older person at that time would not have been able to. And I still remember meeting the extraordinary Vikram Batra. It was my interview in which when I asked him, aren't you scared? And he said, Ye dil mange more. And that was a Pepsi slogan at that time, and it became the war cry of a country, right? And he was one of the first interviews I did. And then he, of course, sort of sacrificed his life a few days later in an assault, and he was one of the first obituaries I wrote. So I always call, and he had written to his brother, and he told me this also in his interview, that either I will bring home the tricolor, or I will come home draped in one. And he came home draped in one. And so those were very powerful moments for me as a 26, 27-year-old. I'd never seen any of this before. It was the first exposure to heroism, to death, to danger. And I always call Kargil a masterclass in life. And I remember one of the proudest moments for me was I came back to Delhi, and the Army Chief, General Malik, called me for a cup of tea. And he was just, he just told me, thank you for everything you've done, because you really helped, put this story on the national sort of agenda and made people understand the valor of soldiers. But a lot of people don't understand, like for us, we used to shoot on tapes then. And even to get tapes back to Delhi, we would walk for miles, and we would find like helicopter pilots who were carrying the coffins of our soldiers back home. And with folded hands, we would beg them, can you take our tapes to Delhi? And that's how we would get our footage back. So it was an extraordinary transformative experience. It changed me for life. And I feel a great honor and privilege to have had the opportunity to report it.
That has to be probably one of the craziest experiences of anyone's life. Like right there. It gave me goosebumps even listening to what it would have. I can't imagine the roller coaster of emotions that you must be experiencing while.
Absolutely, it stays with me today like it was just happened yesterday. It's that real even today.
Yeah, it's one of the most remembered, most iconic wars of our country, and you have experienced that firsthand there. God, that gave me goosebumps just listening to that story,
and that's why I call it a privilege and an honor that I had that chance.
Definitely, it must have. It's like a life lesson. You learned so much.
Masterclass in life. That's what I call it.
Okay. So thank you so much, ma'am, and thank you for your time. I really
Thank you. Let me ask you a question in the end. What are your dreams?
As of now, I mean, I'm working on. I'm very excited about my YouTube channel. I love making videos for it, and even I maybe hope to be a journalist in the future because I genuinely really enjoy it. I mean, I don't know how it is, but it seems like it's my calling. But yeah, right now I'm just focusing on staying in school,
Have fun. The most
graduating
important thing is
college.
to love what you do
Yeah.
and you find your calling.
Yeah, definitely. But like I definitely think that it's like there is some part of me that just it won't settle until I do something related to journalism in my life, because it I can do it for hours and I won't get bored for it.
That sounds
I
great.
want to leave all my schoolwork and just do this. And I don't. I find it so much fun.
Well, all the best to you.
Thank you so much, man.
Thank you.
And thank you for
Bye.
your time. Bye.